Hi there, my name is Matt Furness and this is The Culture Hack, a video and podcast series that captures experiences and life lessons from those who know culture best. The goal? To help you to understand, design and change your company culture. Thanks for tuning in. Hi everybody and welcome to The Culture Hack. It's Matt Furness here from Click Culture Consulting and I'm delighted to be joined today by Penny Mallory. Now, Penny is a former rally driver and champion and competed in an otherwise male-dominated World Rally Championship. She's a former TV presenter and stunt driver. What a combination that is. She's written books on mindset and taking control of your life. And today she's a keynote speaker and leading authority on the topic of mental toughness. I'm really looking forward to talking to her today. So welcome, Penny. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you, Matt, for inviting me.
So we'll be talking today about the intersection between company culture and mental toughness. But first, I've shared your background almost in a bullet point list fashion. So help me and our listeners to understand a little bit more about your story and your background.
Okay, so I'm going to keep this brief because I could talk about this for an hour. But effectively, I left home at 14 years old. I was in a very dysfunctional environment. It was horrible for various reasons. And I never went back from 14. I was sort of an independent soul. Little did I know I was developing mental toughness from about the age of 6, probably. I had a dream when I was 6 years old to drive rally cars. That was never going to happen because I ended up in homeless hostels and my life was really not good. And I suppose I hit a rock bottom when I had a choice. I could do something stupid or something fantastic. And I chose to take myself off to a rally school just to fulfill my childhood dream of being a rally driver. And thankfully that day changed the rest of my life. And I went on to drive for 12 years and I ended up driving a Ford Focus World Rally car. So I was the first woman to ever do that in that sort of car. And the first, I think still the only woman to drive for Ford in a World Championship event. So that was beyond my wildest dreams. But that always comes to an end. A sporting life has an end point. And then I went on to present car programs. And then I sort of threw myself into lots of ambitious challenges, I suppose, because you get quite addicted to adrenaline and I like the idea of pushing myself. So all those things have helped me to develop mental toughness. That is my life in a very small nutshell.
And what I find really interesting when I talk to guests on this show is when you trace it back to people's roots, you can understand why they've become an expert in whatever that topic may be. And I think you said something along the lines of you've been developing mental toughness since you were a small child. So let's start there. Let's start with, how would you define mental toughness first? And why do you see it as being so important?
Okay, so there's lots of misconceptions about mental toughness because mental toughness sounds a bit aggressive. It sounds a bit macho. It couldn't be further from that. It's about compassion, it's about empathy, it's about deep listening, it's about self-awareness, all the soft stuff. And it's your ability to manage stress and pressure, challenges, changes. It's about your ability to take things in your stride. If you get knocked sideways by life's events, life can be really, really tough. So it's about being able to stay focused despite what's going on around you. It's about self-awareness is the absolute basis for this. I know what I could be better at and I'm going to do that. I know where I'm lacking. I know where I'm strong, and not kidding yourself. So that really deep self-awareness is really, again, the foundation. And if of course you can perform well at a high level when you have the 4 aspects of mental toughness, which I'll talk you through, you're likely to perform well, you're likely to succeed, you're likely to enjoy your life. It's going to be less of a struggle. So on the whole, not always true, but on the whole, mental toughness is an advantage. But the other end of the spectrum is mental sensitivity. And you can still be super successful as a mentally sensitive person, somebody who's probably more empathetic, but copes less well with stress and pressure. But you can also be mentally tough and mess everything up. So, there's no right or wrong here. The diversity in an organization or a group or a team, you need a bit of everything. But I would say on the whole, mental toughness can work really well for you.
Okay. And you spoke about lots of different things as sort of fitting under this umbrella term of mental toughness. And then you mentioned, there being 4 areas. So could you talk me through a little bit on what are those different areas of mental toughness?
Yeah, okay. So there's 4 areas. They all begin with C. So the first one is control, the sense of control you have of your life. I've been out of control, and it's a horrible feeling. If you can develop a sense of control, the extent to which you feel you can control what you're experiencing or your ability to achieve something, you tend to bounce back quicker from setbacks. You're more committed. You probably work a bit harder. So developing a great sense of control of your life is really important. But there's also your emotions. If you can manage your emotions better, help other people to manage their emotions, maybe not get infected by other people's emotions. That's also really a valuable skill. Then there's your ability to see every challenge you face as an opportunity. So a lot of people, at work are given another project and they go, oh man, really? I can't, and their first reaction, their mental response to that situation is negative. And that makes that project that they have to see through, it's going to be quite hard work. So it's your ability to get excited about the challenge. It might be daunting, but there's something in it really exciting, and you're going to learn something, you're going to find some nugget of gold. So being excited and optimistic and hopeful about the challenge is a great skill. Then there's your commitment, your ability to set a task, complete a task. Easy to set a task. Lots of people set themselves goals and do nothing about them. Mentally tough people tend to get quite excited about persisting and being diligent to complete the task because it gives them a great sense of satisfaction. But of course, not everyone's like that. Some people hate goals. They hate the idea of pushing themselves and getting out of their comfort zone, which you quite often have to do to complete a task or a challenge. And then finally, there's confidence, your ability, or the sense of confidence you have in your ability. I know I can do this. I got this. You don't need to stroke me and support me. I know I can do this. So that real sense of I can do it. I believe in my ability. But there's also your confidence interpersonally, managing, dealing with, influencing other people, the extent to which you're prepared to engage with other people, because no one does anything on their own. We all need people to get somewhere. We lean on each other. So those are in a nutshell, the 4 aspects. They break down into another 4. So there's 8 in total, but it's a bit in depth for this conversation. But on the whole, those 4.
Got it. So you've got control, challenge, commitment, and confidence. And what I
Yeah.
notice is there's quite a lot of overlaps there with existing sort of or other concepts that people talk a lot about, like resilience. So how would you differentiate mental toughness from concepts like resilience?
Yeah, and they're very closely linked. I mean, we can be resilient to something that's unpleasant. We can get through it because we have to. That's more of a survival mode. I've got to do this. I've got to get through it. And that's where the sort of control and commitment comes in. Your ability to survive something. However, you can be faced with a challenge and you can get quite optimistic, quite hopeful, quite positive about it, which is more about the challenge and the confidence aspects. And that's your ability to thrive. So you could say that the resilience is something you do because you have to, and mental toughness is something that you experience because you want to. That could completely change how you approach a situation, how much you're prepared to throw at it. Because, like anything, if we enjoy stuff, it doesn't feel so hard. We're more likely to perform if we're enjoying something.
Okay. And so I like that distinction between doing it because you have to, doing it because you want to, and
You want
there's
to,
this intrinsic source of motivation to do so.
right?
What I thought was really interesting earlier was you talked about how the almost the 2 poles of, you've got mental toughness at one end and you've got mental sensitivity at the other end. What I'm really curious about is, what would you describe the potential risks or dangers of mental toughness as being, if you compare it then to the opposite side, so being mentally sensitive?
Okay, so I am very mentally sensitive in some areas, and I'm quite mentally tough in other areas. And that will be the same for everybody. Every human being is unique. We all have, also on different days of the week, different times of the day, you're going to be stronger or weaker in different areas. But if you imagine somebody who's mentally tough, who's really focused on a goal, they're so intensely focused that, do you know what? I'm not listening to anyone else because I know what I'm doing here. As a leader of an organization, for example, that could be a nightmare because you've hired all these amazing people and you're not listening to them. You also become quite intimidating. You may not display your emotions, which means nobody knows what they're dealing with. You're hard to read. That's really difficult for people. So you don't get the best out of your people or your team when you're so focused that you don't take on the advice, the thoughts, the creativity of the people around you. That's what you've hired them for. That's what you're paying them for. And a lot of organizations, unfortunately, do have people who are too mentally tough in some areas. So it can pose a problem if you are too much the end of the spectrum. Lots of empathy, deep listening, self-awareness. It's got to be a good thing, right?
Yeah, I totally get that, and I really like how you're balanced about it. I mean, I've spoken to some people, and they've got a thing, right? And they almost see that one thing as the silver bullet for any of humankind's issues. Whereas what I really appreciate about what you're saying is there are potential dangers and risks, and the example that you've just provided me is a really powerful one, I think, and it's one that resonates with me. At times, I'm overly rigid with my goals, and then I don't listen enough, and I don't sort of look out more broadly. So I totally get that. What it's made me think about. Sorry, go on,
the
Penny.
point here. Sorry, Matt, but the point here is that we tend to assume that everyone thinks like we do. I assume that people think like I do, and that's a massive mistake. Every human being is an individual, and we all respond differently. If you set me a challenge, I'll be like, woohoo, fantastic. You set my friend a challenge, and they'll go, oh no, really? Do I have to? It's easy to assume that we all respond the same way to stuff, and we don't. I've spoken at sales conferences where the boss is on stage going, right, we've doubled the targets, guys, isn't this amazing? And half the audience are going, really? Oh god, no. And they're not excited as the boss is at delivering these insane targets. So I think as human beings, we just assume that everyone thinks the way that we do, and they don't. Everyone is complex, everyone is individual.
So what I think is really interesting about the point that you just raised, Penny, is I think that's something often we consciously understand, that we all see and view the world differently and have different assumptions and so on, but then sort of when we get thrown into the reality of life, it's just something that we forget, and sort of we implicitly believe that other people are thinking and feeling the same way as we do. Just to step back, one thing that I've noticed in society today is there's an increasing focus around ideas like self-love, being kind to yourself, knowing when to rest, things like that. And I'm just wondering, how does mental toughness sit with these ideas, and is it in conflict with them?
It's very much not in conflict. I mean, the one thing that we all have to remember and understand is that every individual is an individual. I am not going to respond the same way you are to the same conversation, the same thoughts, the same challenges. We're different. And most people assume that everyone thinks like I do, or, why are they saying that? Because that's not right. But everyone has their own mental response to a situation. 8 billion people or whatever there is in the world, there'll be 8 billion responses. So there's a danger in an organization that, for example, the sales director doubles the targets for everyone, and he's going to assume that everyone's going to go, "Way, this is exciting," when actually they're probably demotivated, de-energized, lost all focus because this is insane. So the sales director will assume everyone's going to get excited. Everyone has to display excitement because they might lose their job. So very dangerous to assume that we all will respond to the same things in the same way. When you talk about self-care, self-love, this is a massive area of mental toughness, which, because mental toughness sounds a bit, it's got to be about looking after yourself, because when you're in good shape, you perform well. And I'm a little bit evangelical about physical activity. I personally take it to another level because I do quite extreme stuff. But I recognise that I feel better, my mood lifts, I think more clearly when I take physical activity. So I do it a lot. I'm not very happy when the alarm goes off at 5:30 and it's dark outside, but I remind myself that in an hour or two I'm going to feel amazing. So that's enough for me to drag myself out of bed. Bill Bryson, I don't know if you've ever read his book, The Body. It's amazing. Everyone must read it. But he says in it, physical activity, if you could put the benefits of that into a pill, it'd be the biggest selling drug on earth. It's free. And if people are feeling in a fog, if their just brain feels like it's going to melt, they're having a tough time, the best thing you can do to look after yourself is to get out and give yourself some physical activity, because there's no organ in your body, no system in your body that won't benefit. It's a win-win-win. But people make excuses, and that's just, they'll get to a point where they won't want to make excuses, because when your desire for something outweighs the excuses, you're good to go. So looking after yourself is a massively important part of mental toughness, because if you look after yourself and you feel good, you're in great shape, you can perform better. So it's very important. And most people, they will talk themselves out of all sorts of things, and that's their mental response, and that's fair enough. But when you change your mental response, which we all can, it takes half a second to change the way you respond, then you start to feel the benefits.
So it almost sounds like the idea of self-love and mental toughness for you they're not at odds with one another. And it sounds like you've used the example of like physical self-love, exercise, and how that can actually support your mental toughness. What about emotional self-love? So what I mean by that is, if you've failed in a project, or if that something's gone wrong, the idea that it's okay to tell yourself, it's okay to feel upset. It's okay. You don't be like, look at what you've done well, all those sorts of the emotional self-love. Is that at odds with mental toughness?
No, it's absolutely about mental toughness. It's about being able to see what's happened and flip it to a positive, optimistic, hopeful mindset. So I've just tried something and it was a disaster. It didn't go well. Well, I could think that, and I'm a failure and it's all a disaster. But I could think, hang on a minute, didn't go my way. But actually, what did I learn from that? Because there's something in that I didn't know before. So you don't learn a great deal from winning at everything, but you always learn a great deal when things don't go your way, because you know what more or less you can do next time. So failure, not a word in my life, but people, I reframe it completely, which is, there's got to be something amazing I can learn for next time here. So that is another form of self-love, because, we spend our whole lives in our heads, don't we? You might as well make it a nice place to be. And it's very, very easy to drag ourselves down into a dark place. It's also not that hard to flip a situation, but like anything, it takes practice. The first time you do it, doesn't work, but the 100th time you do it, and so it's just creating new habits. And if you start to think that there's a positive spin on everything that you're experiencing, and you do it all the time, you spend less time in a dark place.
Okay, so it sounds like both, physical self-care, emotional self-care, and self-love, they're not at odds actually at all with your view and your definition of mental toughness. I think for me, the question then becomes: is mental toughness something that you're born with, or something that you can you can continually grow and develop?
My mental toughness developed at a very high rate because of my background. So I can't tell you if I was born like that or if I developed it. I don't know. I would suggest my environment created my mental toughness. There'll be a whole bunch of people out there go, no, you were born that way. I would go on the side of nurture rather than nature. But you'll get different views on it. But regardless, you can develop it every day. So no matter where you came from, what you experienced, and whatever your life is like today, you can start to make it different tomorrow by trying lots of different ways to develop mental toughness. I've written 365 ways to develop mental toughness, which you can get on Amazon. And there aren't 365 ways. There's 365 million ways you can do it. But it's a lot about self-discipline, and knowing that the short-term pain is the long-term gain. Sometimes, just by practicing discomfort for some people, you adjust to things very quickly. If you hold the plank position for 30 seconds today, you'll probably be able to hold it for a minute next week. And in a month, you could probably hold it for 5 minutes. Well, that's an uncomfortable thing. Most people go, oh, don't want to do that. But if you did, you would be developing some discipline and some focus and all those things that actually transpose into other areas of your life. So for some people, that works really well.
So it sounds like you've got a whole long list of all the various different things that you can do to build mental toughness, which is great. Obviously, we don't have time to go through them all today, but what I'd love to hear is, I don't know, 2 or 3 maybe practical things that listeners and myself could go away and do straight away after listening to you speak, Penny.
Okay, so for some people, practicing tolerating discomfort works very well. So you might have an email in your inbox that you absolutely have been avoiding for a long time. And by opening it and seeing to it and getting it done, it might be uncomfortable, but that would be a useful way of facing something you don't want. It could be, you could do the plank position for 30 seconds today, but next week you might be able to do it for a minute, and then in a month you could do it for 5 minutes. It's uncomfortable, it's not very pleasant, but just by doing something you don't really want to do builds resilience, builds your focus, your discipline. And those are all ways of developing mental toughness. For some people, they take a cold shower in the morning, which is deeply uncomfortable, but sets them up for the day because they think they can face anything that day. You could just go for a walk and reflect on, and I'm feeling out of control. What might be stopping me having, what's in the way of me having more control? Is it the people around me? Is it my lack of confidence? Just sometimes it's a self-reflection thing that requires some deep self-awareness and honesty with yourself. Sometimes it's better to do with somebody who's challenging you. But there are a million ways that you can do something every day to develop mental toughness. So I don't even know where to start because there's just so many. But doing something you don't want to do today, like getting to the end of that book, or going through the spreadsheet that you've been avoiding, just doing little things like that, and the sense of satisfaction when you've done it is brilliant. And then the next time you've got to do it, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, when you've delivered sessions on mental toughness and you've spoken to then leaders or people, however long after, what are the techniques that they have told you have worked best for them?
And that's the point, is that every person I speak to will have a different experience.
Okay.
So for some, people come up to me at the end of my talks and somebody might say, I'm going to go for a run in the morning. And they email me and they go, wow, I didn't expect to enjoy that. But that physical activity can help you feel physically stronger, therefore mentally stronger, perhaps more in control. Somebody else might say, I'm going to see that project through that I've put on the back burner forever. I'm actually going to do it. So there is no one answer to this because everybody's switch is flicked by something different. For some people, it's picking up the phone to that person, having that difficult conversation they've been avoiding. Do you know what? I'm just going to do it. And so rarely does it not benefit them. And just having some courage and pushing through the fear of something, having a little bit more courage than you did yesterday, that's a massive impact on some people.
And so we're talking about it at the moment with specifically referring to yourself, right, and how you can proactively build mental toughness. It sounds like you've got hundreds of options and you need to figure out the best one for you. What about if you are a manager or a leader or a HR professional? What do you do when you notice that people in your team or your area in the business have varying levels of mental toughness? Is there anything you can do?
And the fact is, everyone will have varying degrees of mental toughness. That's good. You need that diversity because, the more creative people and the more robust sort of bounce back from disaster people, you need a bit of everything in the room. I think, from my perspective, what I see happen more than ever is that the leaders, one, they assume everyone knows what they're thinking, and they don't. So if they don't know what you're thinking, you need to tell them. So that much more communicative approach. This is why I'm pushing you. This is why you're on board with this, because this will be the result, and reminding them really regularly, we're doing this because it's taking us to this place. Then people get excited, they tend to work a bit harder, they bounce back quicker. People forget to communicate the why. Why are we doing this? Why have you set me these insane targets? What's the benefit to me? Because ultimately, I love working for this business, but this is my life it's affecting. Make it more personal, get them excited about being part of delivering this mission, this vision that the leader has. Help them to make it a reality by getting actually involved emotionally in it. And I think people just forget. They do the annual conference, and they do this is what we've done, this is what we're going to do, see you next year. It's not going to keep people on side. They need that once a week, constant.
So I heard a couple of points there. So I think the first one was around making sure that you're communicating why you're setting these really challenging goals, why you're pushing people, and why that's okay to not sort of work in this really overly supportive, overly cozy work environment and have these high levels of challenge. And then the second point I heard you say was around really making it personable, getting people involved emotionally so they understand what's in it for them as individuals, and it's not just something that you're pushing them to do as a leader that they won't benefit from.
That's right. And, people get a job and they go to work and they earn a salary, and that gives them a life away from work. But if you're excited by your workday and you're excited by your away from work stuff, isn't that? Okay, I'm painting a perfect picture. It's not always going to be like this, but yeah, people go to work for their own gain. Ultimately, they might have the corporate blood running through their veins, but ultimately, it's because they can have a fabulous life in total. So yeah, I think leaders miss that trick sometimes. Not always. There's some people who do it so well, and it's so obvious when I speak to an organization who get it right. It's so obvious that they're doing those things well.
And so you're starting to talk here about the things that leaders and organizations often get wrong. What are the other big things that you see people stumble on when leading people and trying to develop mental toughness?
Well, I think the corporations have a really tough job. So I'm going to set you some insane targets with some really ambitious deadlines, and I'm going to push you. You're going to be under huge stress and huge pressure. That's one side. And then they've got to support you while they're doing that. That's their corporate responsibility. So, you could say, I'm going to punch you on one cheek and I'm going to kiss you on the other. That's a really difficult balance for an organization to get right. And of course, in organizations, you're going to have a complete spectrum of people, and some will be, in a sense, over supported, which I don't believe personally is, in some situations it's necessary, in some it's not. You can over support people, so when you take the support away, they fall over. So sometimes helping people too much doesn't help them. But I'm generalizing, and that's not right, because everybody needs something different. And HR might send everyone on a training course and not have checked what flicks the switch of those people. So some will come back from the training course going, that was amazing. And some will come back going, what a waste of time. Because nobody checked to see what's going on with them, how they're thinking. Your personality, how you respond to stuff is hidden inside. And you got to talk to people to discover that stuff. Easy to just have a blanket approach to people, and that's not how you're going to get the best out of everybody and the performance of the organization.
I thought a point that you raised a minute ago was quite interesting as well, around being overly supportive, and sometimes the more you help people, actually you might actually not be helping them, and it can have
Right.
counterproductive effects, right? What are the moments within which you see leaders and organizations falling into that trap?
Say that again. What are the moments I see that happening? Is that what you said?
Yeah, what are the moments within which you see organizations falling into that trap of providing so much support and so much help that actually it might be counterproductive?
Um, Gosh, hard to see because I don't live in those organisations day to day. I just get a general picture. But there are some people who are very mentally sensitive. They might be brilliant at their job, but they just don't respond well to pressure. So
Mm,
you might to lift the pressure off those people, and they can perform, but perhaps without doing a blanket approach, if you did a more one-to-one approach, you could probably get a great deal more out of that person if you knew what they responded well to. And and if you take the support away from somebody who really needs it, that won't work. If you over support somebody who probably may not need that much support, that's not going to help them. It's a personal one-to-one approach. And of course, leaders will go, well, I can't talk to everyone in the organization. And I would
mm,
say, you can. You
mm,
totally can do that. Why
mm,
can't you do that? And if that's your approach, that seems a real shame that
mm,
you're not hiring individuals here. You're just, it needs an individual approach, but a lot of companies will reject that approach because it's too expensive. Well, I would say you can't afford not to.
mm. I think it sounds like the onus is on line managers and leaders to really understand their people and what their
Yeah,
needs are and what gets the best out of them. And
exactly
I
that.
would, what I would build on there is, it doesn't necessarily need to cost the world. It costs nothing for a line manager in a one-to-one to ask you, what would it, think about the best work you've done ever. What was the environment like? What did you, what were you getting? What do you need from me to do your best work ever? All of those questions will give you a lot of data about the environment that the people that you lead need. They don't cost anything at all.
Exactly right. And you can measure somebody's mental toughness. So there's an assessment that I can provide for people through AQR, who are the global gurus of mental toughness. And basically, you get a questionnaire, you fill it out, you get a 15-page report on your mental toughness, but it highlights the areas that could be developed. That's much more useful than a psychometric test that gives you a color or some letters. So what? This questionnaire will give you scores and say your confidence is a 3, but your commitment is a 10. Well, let's see how we can, you know, work on your confidence. It gives you really great data to help to develop those areas that people could benefit from. So yeah, it could be a questionnaire, it could be some coaching, it could be just a conversation. So many
Mm,
ways to do it.
mm. And we've talked already about lots of different practical strategies that you can use to develop mental toughness in yourself, and as well as doing it in others. What I always ask my guests is, what's a culture hack that you love? So something small that takes little effort but can have perhaps a really big impact.
Oh well, in the some a decade ago, it would be some sushi or some big cushions to sit on, and we've got cappuccinos. I think we've passed all that. Um, Asking somebody, "Is your wife okay? How did the operation go?" Remembering the personal side of people's lives changes their day. You know, how was the holiday? Did you manage to do the boat trip? Little, just taking an interest in somebody's actual real life
Mm,
is game changing for some people. Like, oh my God, he listened, he heard that, and he remembered my name. That lifts people's spirits. They feel like they belong, and feeling like you belong makes you go back to your desk and give it another 5% because wow,
mm,
I actually matter here. So it's nothing. It's the little things that matter in life always, isn't it? People say to me, "How do you relax? What do you enjoy doing?" I'm just an ordinary person. I like a walk in the woods. I like a Sunday roast at the pub. I like a Netflix and a log fire. It's the little things in life that are almost the most impactful and important.
I mean, that certainly resonates with me. I mean, I used to work with a leader who was exceptional at that. They would remember things that you said about your personal life 6 months ago, and it just made me care much more about the work that I was doing. Again, totally free, and when I talked to him, he actually listened. He was taking scribbles, and it's not about work stuff he's scribbling about. It's like almost like, oh, Matt's got, going on this holiday, like let me, I'm just going to make sure that I ask him in a few weeks how his holiday was. It's showing as much intent and effort with your people as you do with your results and the bottom line.
Exactly. And you're remembering that all these years later, it stuck with you because it meant the world to you. And it's so easy to do. And it's got to be genuine. I mean, there's no point in asking me taking an interest in you to make you feel good, but actually, I don't really care. You can tell when somebody doesn't care, but you remember that guy and you remember what it said and you remember the difference it made. And that's, like you said, it's free and it's easy.
Absolutely brilliant. So I'm conscious of time. We could talk about this all day, conscious of your time, conscious of the listeners' time. So just before we close, do you have any final reflections on our conversation, Penny?
Well, I suppose what I want to leave with listeners is that, one, if you're in the midst of a storm, the storm will pass. Keep going. You can do this. Don't give up. That's a really important thing. Every storm will pass. So however horrible it is right now, it's not always going to be like this. So just hold on to that optimistic, positive, hopeful aspect. Have a little reflection on your life, because most people know what they avoid. Just try not avoiding it. Face it head on. Today, I don't know what's wrong with today, by the way. I'll wait till Monday. I don't know why you'd do that. Nothing wrong with today. And just small incremental differences compound into something really powerful, and trust the process. And don't give up. If it doesn't work the first time, keep going, because nothing's easy when you start. It just gets easier when you do it more. So that's, and by the way, the 4 aspects of mental toughness that I mentioned, none is more important than the other. They are all important and they will all shift and change all day long. So don't be surprised if your confidence is low today, but high tomorrow. That's life. That's normal.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Penny. What a lovely note to end on. And if people want to contact you, what's the best way to do so?
Oh, Instagram, LinkedIn, my website. Just type my name in and you'll have a choice of how to reach me. But I'm easy to reach.
Okay, brilliant. Awesome. Well, I just finally want to close by saying a huge thank you to you, Penny, for sharing your time and your experiences. Thank you so much. And if you like this episode, please do listen to our other episodes for more first-hand experiences and lessons on all things culture. Otherwise, that's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and go well, everybody.